Yes, sir.
Why did you write about her? Have you met her personally? The genesis of all that was?
Sure. Question is, why did I write about her? I didn't myself have an Ayn Rand phase, and I wasn't a strong fan of hers, but I was intrigued by how many people were interested in Ayn Rand, and sort of everywhere I went, I would see somebody reading her book on the bus, or she would come up, and this was when I had enrolled as a doctoral student at UC Berkeley. I was very interested in political conservatism as a topic, and I started asking myself, how did Rand fit into this? Where did Rand fit in American culture? What was her importance? What was her significance? And as soon as I started looking into what had been written about her, I found there wasn't any work that really situated her in her historical context or pulled out the political aspects of her work. So as soon as I saw what I felt was a gap that needed to be filled, I was off and running. And she's just a fascinating woman who allowed me to really draw together so many things I was desperately interested in one coherent story. So, yeah.
What's your favorite Rand?
What's my favorite Rand novel is the question. The Fountainhead, undoubtedly. And if people ask me what they should read, I say start with The Fountainhead. If you love it, then you probably could handle Atlas Shrugged. If you don't, just stick with The Fountainhead. Her other novel, Anthem, gets a lot of play because it's very short. It's under 100 pages, but I think there's a sort of richness and a transcendent nature to The Fountainhead that I would recommend it to. I think some people benefit greatly from reading it, so I've been known to recommend certain persons to read The Fountainhead. In the far back. So let me repeat the question if I understood it. You said one of the cool things about intellectual history is you can mix and match. And who would I compare her to? Is that the gist of your question? Who do I find people compare her to? One contemporary author who people often compare Rand to is Camille Paglia, who has a similar taste for, I think, direct speaking and controversy and kind of stirring up people's ideas about things. You know, that's a very indirect comparison. Rand is kind of one of a kind in a lot of ways. She really is, and that's what makes her interesting. Be that she's one of the kind, there are others who are similar to her. There's traditions that she draws from, but she's hard to compare to others.
Do you have
Yes.
a theory, apart from the publicization of popularity, as you mentioned, the number of folks who recommended her recently, why her reading or why her books have suddenly become so popular? Do you have a theory on this?
So the question is, do I have a theory about why she's become so popular? I have several interrelated theories. One is I know from my research that she tends to become popular during times of liberal governance and government expansion. So one of her first waves of popularity came during Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. She again becomes relevant and salient to people during the Great Society. And so I think the Obama presidency and the intervention in markets that's happened since fall of 2008 has really caught people's attention in terms of government is growing. What does Ayn Rand have to say about that? So that's one answer. I also think that she's been around enough, and there's been a sort of growing interest in her that it's reached maybe a tipping point. I would also say there's another theory out there I tend to like, which is the designer of BioShock, which is the best-selling video game, designed this video game around objectivism. It's made it sort of a model dystopia, and there's some theories out there that say the spike in sales of her books corresponds with the release dates of BioShock. Not sure about that. So there's a lot of ways you can spin it, but I think her cultural moment has arrived for many different factors in 2009. Yeah, perhaps the highest point of the cycle from now, but yeah, good question. Yes?
She wrote at a time before you had all of this automation and the ability to produce without the labor you needed then. And she didn't know that globalization was coming to a point where you could have everything sent to a third world country and everything produced quickly. Now, do you think that she would be as conservative as she was if she sees people like our society now that can't get jobs and that are suffering because of what's going on. And like when I was in the 50s, I remember that people who were working got raises every year, and the work week gradually was shortened. All that stopped. The work week increased. People are not getting wage increases.
Right, right. So yeah.
What do you think she would think of society today with her philosophy?
So the gist of the question is sort of how would she respond to globalization and the way that's changed the American workforce or American experience of professional work. I don't think she would have changed, it would have changed her, her ideas at all. I think actually one thing that's really interesting about her is how many sort of new economy workers find her work really compelling, because it describes your work is sort of an expression of self and individualism, and for a lot of people working in jobs where they're not necessarily wedded to a company, but it's kind of they're being entrepreneurial within a certain field, they really identify with that, and they see her as sort of a futuristic prophet of that type of capitalism. And I don't think it would have changed her ideas, because she had a deep faith in the ability of markets to renew and human ingenuity and creativity, and I think she would have said, in comparison to where we've been, things are pretty good, and as long as we don't fetter people with too much regulation, they will come up with new ideas and new ways to move the economy forward. So I think her vision of capitalism was always renewing, as long as it wasn't being inhibited by top-down controls. Yes?
You mentioned the division between Buckley and Rand due to their religious or anti-religious beliefs. Yet that all seems to get pushed aside when she's considered today. It's like her secularism just disappears.
Yeah.
Do you think people just aren't aware of it and how it impacts her philosophy, or do you think they just don't want to bring it up?
Yeah, so the question is, given what a big issue her atheism was to Buckley in the 50s, why is this not part of the conversation about her today? I've noticed that. It's a really good, interesting thing to notice. I think it has to do with the context of the 1950s. Religion was such a loaded issue because we were facing atheistic communism, and we'd just gone through World War II, and the most vociferous conservative critic of her was Whittaker Chambers, who felt as an ex-communist he'd experienced the worst that could happen when you lost religious faith, and so that was his perspective on her work. But I think those issues of religion and politics were charged in the 1950s in a way they're not today, and that just seems to be less problematic. Maybe there's people feel this is a less hot issue or less of a danger either direction. I'm not sure, but I just would point to how very different our fears were in the 1950s than they are today, and our fear that our identity was tied up in being religious or Judeo-Christian, and that she really threatened that. And today maybe that identity is more solidified.